something important is starting to become very clear when you take a deeper look at the New England Patriots offense, and it's not as simple as saying the running game was good or bad. The reality sits right in the middle, and when you break it down, it tells a much more revealing story about where this team truly stands heading into the 2026 season. Because if you just look at the surface numbers, you might walk away thinking the Patriots had a solid rushing attack. Statistically, they were in the top half of the league in total rushing production. That alone sounds promising. It gives the impression of a team that can move the ball on the ground, control the clock, and take pressure off the quarterback. But when you dig deeper, that narrative starts to fall apart. The effectiveness of that rushing attack tells a completely different story. The Patriots ranked near the bottom of the league in rush efficiency, and that's where the real concern begins. This wasn't a consistent, reliable ground game. It was a volatile one, built on isolated explosive plays rather than sustained success. Take one example that perfectly captures this contradiction. In a game where the numbers looked outstanding, the Patriots averaged over 6 yards per carry and piled up significant yardage on the ground. But the truth is, a massive portion of that production came from just 2 runs, one for 69 yards and another for 55. Those 2 plays alone accounted for 124 yards. Remove or even reduce those explosive moments, and suddenly the entire performance looks average at best. And that wasn't an isolated case. That pattern showed up multiple times throughout the season. Big plays, masking deeper issues. It created an illusion of success, but underneath, the consistency simply wasn't there. So the natural question becomes, where exactly was the problem? It all points back to the interior offensive line. When you evaluate the structure of the run game, especially inside zone concepts, the Patriots struggled heavily. The success rate on interior runs ranked near the bottom of the league, sitting at 31st. That's not just a minor issue, that's a foundational weakness in how the offense operated. The biggest breakdown came in combo blocking. That coordination between linemen starting with a double team and transitioning to pick up a linebacker was frequently ineffective. As a result, defenders were reaching the second level far too easily, meeting running backs before plays could properly develop. And when that happens, it doesn't matter how talented your running backs are, they're forced to react instead of attack. They're searching for gaps that never open. There was some contrast depending on the runner. A more north-south style back like Rhamondre Stevenson could manage slightly better in tight spaces, but even then, the lack of push in clean lanes limited the overall impact. Meanwhile, more explosive players relied on getting outside, where speed could compensate for interior breakdowns. Another stat reinforces this issue even further. The Patriots ranked 31st in yards after contact. That tells you everything. Not only were holes not opening, but contact was happening almost immediately. There was no space, no rhythm, no ability to build momentum. So what did the offense do to compensate? They leaned into outside runs, stretch concepts, and plays designed to get the ball to the perimeter. That's where the occasional explosive plays came from. That's how they stayed afloat statistically. But it was never a sustainable formula. Now here's where things start to shift heading into 2026. The Patriots clearly identified this interior weakness as a priority, and their moves reflect that. Bringing in Elijah Vera Tucker is not just a depth addition, it's a direct response to a critical flaw. His presence adds stability, physicality, and most importantly, reliability to the interior. At the same time, moving Jared Wilson back to his natural position at center is another key adjustment. Last season, he was playing out of position, and that showed in the overall cohesion of the line. Putting players in roles that fit their strengths is a fundamental step toward fixing those breakdowns. And this isn't happening in isolation. The philosophy behind these moves is becoming very clear. This team wants to establish a more consistent, more physical identity in the run game. Not just explosive moments, but sustained drives. Add to that the presence of a run-blocking tight end like Julian Hill, and the picture becomes even clearer. This offense is being built to run the ball with purpose. But it's not just about the ground game. There's another layer developing that should get fans paying attention. While the structural changes are happening up front, the leadership and chemistry on offense are also evolving, especially with Drake Maye. Seeing him out there working with receivers, organizing sessions, building timing and wrapper-it matters, it shows intent. It shows ownership. He's not waiting for the season to start, he's actively shaping the offense. And what stands out even more is who he's working with. Not just established names, but players still developing, still trying to carve out their role. That's how connections are built. That's how trust is formed before the pressure of real games kicks in. So now everything starts to connect. You have an offensive line that's being restructured to fix its biggest weakness. You have a running game that, while flawed, has already shown it can produce explosive moments. And you have a young quarterback stepping into a leadership role, building chemistry with his weapons. The defense may have carried this team last season, but the offense is quietly laying the foundation to become something much more balanced and potentially dangerous. But here's the real question, and this is where it gets interesting. With these changes in place, with the adjustments on the offensive line, with the focus on fixing the interior, do you believe this rushing attack can truly become a strength for the Patriots in 2026? Or are these issues deeper than just personnel fixes? And this is exactly where things start to get even more interesting, because once you look beyond the structure of the offensive line and the adjustments that were clearly made, you begin to see a bigger vision forming for this New England Patriots offense, and it all revolves around identity. Last season, one of the biggest problems wasn't just inconsistency in execution, it was inconsistency in identity. One week, the offense looked like it wanted to be physical and run first. The next, it leaned on explosive plays to bail them out. There was no true foundation, no reliable formula that you could point to and say, this is who they are. But now, with everything we've just broken down, that identity is starting to take shape. Because when you improve the interior offensive line, you're not just fixing a weakness, you're unlocking your entire playbook. Inside zone starts working, which means play action becomes more dangerous. Linebackers are forced to respect the run, which opens passing lanes. Everything begins to connect. And that's where someone like Drake Maye becomes the centerpiece of this transformation. What he's doing right now, working out with receivers, building chemistry, organizing throwing sessions, it might seem small on the surface, but this is exactly how great offenses are built behind the scenes. Timing, trust, anticipation, those things don't just magically appear on game day, and what stands out the most is the approach. He's not only working with established names, but also with guys who are still developing, still fighting for their role. That matters because it creates competition, depth, and unexpected connections. Take players like Demario Douglas and Kyle Williams, for example. These aren't players that automatically command national attention, but within this system, they have the opportunity to grow into something much bigger, especially when they're putting in this kind of work during the offseason. And then there's the comparison that's quietly being made internally similar to what happened with Kayshon Boutte. That connection with Drake Maye didn't just appear overnight, it developed over time, through reps, through trust, through consistency. And now, there's a belief that kind of progression can happen again. At the same time, you have Elliott Wolf in the front office making it clear, development is expected. It's not optional. Players like Kyle Williams have the potential, but they need to become more complete, stronger, better blockers, more reliable in every phase of the game. And that ties directly back into what this offense is trying to become. Because if the Patriots are truly going to commit to a run-first physical identity, then every piece has to buy in. Wide receivers have to block, tight ends have to contribute in the run game, running backs have to be decisive, and the offensive line has to create space consistently, not just occasionally. That's the difference between flashes and sustainability. Last season, the flashes were there. Explosive runs, big moments, glimpses of what this offense could be, but they were too dependent on perfect scenarios. Too dependent on breaking one big play instead of building drive after drive. Now, the goal is different. Now, it's about control. It's about being able to line up, run the ball inside, pick up 4, 5, 6 yards consistently, and dictate the pace of the game. It's about forcing defenses to adjust instead of reacting to them. And if that happens, everything opens up not just for the running game, but for Drake Maye as a passer. Because a balanced offense is a quarterback's best friend. It slows down the pass rush, simplifies, reads, and creates opportunities for big plays that are actually built, not improvised. But here's where the pressure comes in, because expectations are starting to rise. When you make these kinds of moves, when you address specific weaknesses this directly, when your young quarterback is putting in the work like this, fans are going to expect results. Not just improvement, but visible, consistent progress. And that brings us right back to the core of this entire conversation. The Patriots didn't just tweak the roster, they made targeted decisions to fix a very specific problem. The interior run game was holding this offense back, and now they've taken real steps to change that. So the question now isn't whether they understand the problem, it's whether they've done enough to solve it. Because if this interior offensive line truly improves, if the run game becomes consistent instead of explosively, and if Drake Maye continues developing chemistry with his weapons, this offense could look completely different in 2026. And that's where things get exciting. But now I want to hear from you. Do you believe these changes are enough to transform the Patriots offense into a consistent, run-dominant unit, or do you still see gaps that could hold this team back? And if you had to choose one factor that will decide their success next season, what would it be? And if you really think about that question, it forces you to look at this team in a completely different way, because now it's no longer about isolated improvements, it's about whether everything connects at the right time. Because here's the truth, fixing the interior offensive line alone won't automatically turn this into a dominant rushing attack. It's a critical piece, maybe the most important one, but it still has to translate on the field. Communication has to be sharp. Timing has to be precise. Those combo blocks that failed last season, they need to become second nature, and that takes reps. Real reps. Not just off-season workouts, not just training camp, it takes live game situations where everything is moving faster, where defenses are adjusting, where mistakes get punished immediately. That's where we're going to find out what this group is really made of. At the same time, there's another layer that can't be ignored, and that's play calling. Because even with improved personnel, the system has to put players in the right position to succeed. If the Patriots truly want to establish that physical, consistent run identity, it has to show up in how the game is called from the very first drive. No more waiting until the second half to find the run. No more abandoning it after one or two negative plays. Commitment is everything. And if they stay committed, that's when you start to wear defenses down. That's when those 4-yard runs turn into 6, then 8, then explosive plays that actually feel earned instead of random. But let's not ignore the pressure that comes with that approach, because when you build an offense around physicality and consistency, there's less margin for error. You have to execute. You have to win at the line of scrimmage. You can't rely on miracle plays to save you, and that's where the spotlight shifts right back onto the development of this offense as a whole. Can the offensive line stay healthy? Can they build chemistry early? Can the running backs trust what they're seeing and hit the hole without hesitation? Can the receivers fully buy into doing the dirty work when the ball isn't coming their way? And maybe the biggest question of all, can this team stay patient enough to let this identity fully develop? Because that's something we haven't consistently seen. In past moments, when things didn't work right away, there was a tendency to shift, to adjust, to look for quick fixes. But building a true identity doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, discipline, and belief in the process. If the Patriots stick with it, if they trust the moves they've made, there's a real path here to becoming one of those offenses that controls games instead of reacting to them. And if that happens, everything changes. Time of possession shifts, the defense stays fresher, the quarterback plays with more confidence, and suddenly, you're not just competing, you're dictating. But if it doesn't come together, if the same issues show up again, missed assignments, lack of push inside, inconsistency in execution, then we're right back to where we started. Flashes of potential, but no true identity. That's why this upcoming stretch from training camp into the early part of the season is going to be so important. You're going to see very quickly whether these changes are real or just hopeful projections. Because on paper, the plan makes sense. The adjustments are logical, the focus is exactly where it needed to be. Now, it's about proving it, and that's what makes this moment so intriguing for Patriots fans. You can see the direction, you can understand the vision, but the outcome? That's still wide open. So as we move closer to the season, keep your eyes on the details. Watch how the interior line performs. Watch how often they go back to the run, even when it's not perfect. Watch the chemistry between Maye and his receivers when play action comes into play. And those little details are exactly what will separate a team that's simply improving from a team that's actually transforming into something dangerous. Because when you start watching closely, you realize it's not just about whether a run gains 4 yards or 10 yards, it's about how that run happens. Are defenders getting pushed back? Are linebackers being forced to hesitate? Is the offensive line moving as one unit instead of 5 separate pieces trying to do their job? That's the kind of progression that doesn't always show up in the box